hashtag is the big story. That is how I am tracking your feedback tonight. And all the lawyers and advocates are still with me on the show. So let me start with you again, Elisha. Today, Justice Odunga said there is no immunity to impunity. But yet, all of these orders have been issued. People have been held in contempt, jailed in absentia. These orders do not seem to be enforceable. How do we make that happen? I mean, what's a judge to do if he asks people to appear in court and they don't, if he makes certain pronouncements with fines and those are not obeyed?
Thank you so much, Yvonne. First and foremost, people must understand that the legal order operates in an environment. You may have the most beautiful constitution in the world, as Kenya does, but you need a constitutional culture to realize the fruits, the desired outcomes of that beautiful constitution. What we have a deficit for in Kenya is a constitutional culture. A constitutional culture is encultured by two critical elements. One is what we call the political will, and two is what we call the vigilance of the people. The fact that each of the orders you have referred to, Kenyans have continually gone to court and sought more orders, means that Kenyans are meeting the critical mass of the test of vigilance of the people. Consistently, in each of the situations you have referred to, it means that there is an absence of political will. Now, does that mean that there is therefore a room for impunity? That is not so. It just means that the legal process is being continually abused. The law continues to speak. The law speaks continuously. The law addresses its majesty to the throne of justice, saying that the law must be obeyed. Now, the problem I have is that if you listen to the interview Sophia Wanuna has just had, you begin to understand why the law is not obeyed. Because if those are the character of people who are left with the instruments of power to enforce the law, then I would say with tremendous sorrow, God save us all. Those people lack the requisite fiber in their systems if that attitude I've seen in that interview is anything to go by. I can tell you as a lawyer speaking here, there is virtually nothing I can comment on in the substance of that interview because the respondent in that interview exhibited one critical attribute, an attribute called dishonesty. What I would encourage Kenyans to do is this, that this country is not winding up tomorrow. There were days when, even judges were complicit in compromising the rule of law. There is a lot to write home about because judges have remained steadfast in this episode ever since it started. There are days when it was not possible to get very many lawyers coming up in court to represent somebody of Miguna's caliber because they feared victimization. Today, batteries of lawyers have turned up in court to represent Miguna. There were days when the general question by the public was, why are you antagonizing the government? Today, you and I are busy asking, why is the government doing this?
Okay.
From all these episodes, I gather that we are making progress. Kenyans must understand that what we're experiencing today is what we call a counter wave to the rule of law, a counter wave to democracy.
All right,
it is upon them to build sufficient beacons to... Yes.
Yeah, we will come back to that and to just sort of see what happens now, which is what you're getting into. We will come back to that. But let me engage Eric. So who's to say if I am summoned to court tomorrow, that I won't say courts cannot issue orders in vain and the court orders are subject to interpretation. We certainly know it might not be the same for me.
Look, Yvonne, I've indicated that I don't want to respond to Itumbi for obvious reasons.
I'm not...
But hypothetically...
Yeah, what I'm asking... I'm
but
not asking you to
hypothetically...
respond to him. I'm asking what precedence it sets. Can I then walk into a court of law, or rather, can I ignore, a summons to appear tomorrow?
The custodian of the rule of law, apart from the general public, is generally the government. So if officers of the government, particularly senior ones, demonstrate to the public that, look, orders can be issued and they will not follow, or they will tend to come up with excuses here and there, then the consequence for rule of law is actually very severe. Remember, despite progress that Ms. Tongoya has alluded to, and I agree with all of them, all over the world, particularly in the developing world, which is normally called the global south, there's normally concerted effort on the part of those in public office to reverse gains. And what we are trying to see at the moment is a deliberate attempt to reverse gains that have been made in terms of rule of law, in terms of judicial independence, in terms of certain order in the society. And believe me, this can be successful if we allow it to continue, and which is why I think that everyone else all over the country needs to be enraged first, and two, lawyers in particular, I think need to unite on this because, you know, at the end of the day, our life depends on existence of a semblance of rule of law. So I expect Matiang'i and his other respondents to appear in court tomorrow. If they don't, at least I expect a very robust, a very firm response from the court in terms of convicting, sentencing them for the contempt of court.
All right, and Akosala, a very firm response in terms of sentencing them. Surely, have we not seen this before? Karanja Kibicho was found in contempt. He was jailed in absentia for 3 months. I believe similar orders will be done tomorrow if these two do not appear. I think Justice Odunga was talking about 6 months. How do we make the consequences so grave that people abide by the court orders? I mean, you know, how do we do that?
I think the biggest problem we are facing right now is the orders, implementation of those orders actually falls back to those people against whom the orders are made for. Let me give you an instance. Who will arrest IG Boynet if it's not his own the policeman? This means that if there is no goodwill from the government to have this, the IG appear in court, nothing could be done, against him. He will not come to court, and listening to Itumbi, the indication is very clear. He will not attend court. The director of immigration will not attend court, neither will the CS. But what will happen? Who will bail the cat in this instance? Yeah. I think we are moving now towards a stage where we need to charge these office holders personally. I am in the know that in this instance, the Law Society of Kenya has instituted proceedings against the CS and the CS Interior, together with CS IT, in view of the closure of media houses, and we are seeking particular indictions against these persons so that they are personally liable. You see, when orders are given and the ripple effect comes back to the people. Taxpayers are the ones going to be paying for, costs.
Okay, but Akosala, yes. Allow me to interject. So even if we're saying that they will be personally liable, and we heard Miguna's lawyers suggesting that in court today, yes, doesn't it still come back to enforcing? Who is going to enforce that? Who is going to make sure that these individuals pay these fines or these awards from their pockets?
Now, that is now where the problem comes in. The same issue that I've been trying to address, who will bail the cat? Yeah. Now, perhaps after they have retired, the same way South Africa have done to Zuma, pursuing him personally, because as long as they are in power and the government that is in place is not willing to do this, then we are going to have a very long, era. What suggestion we were having is it therefore time to have, judicial police officers for the judiciary to help, implement this? Because if you are depending on the police to investigate the police, you are depending on the police to arrest a superior of the police who will tell you attention and you salute. We are actually involving ourselves in a frivolous exercise of pseudo-consensus building.
Okay. Yeah. I want us to get our closing comments. Elisha, you say we're making progress. Perhaps you can talk to us about that and what all these incidents point to with respect to the rule of law and democracy in this country and, just moving a country forward in what you were calling a constitutional culture. But you still think this is progress?
Yes, Yvonne, we are making progress, but very slow progress. Sometimes you move forward, sometimes you encounter counter waves, and they push you back quite a bit. The situation we are going through at the moment is a counter wave, as I had pointed out earlier. we have made quite a bit of progress. But even within the context of this counter wave, we can look at the positives around it. What is the response by respective stakeholders? I had alluded to the following. Number one, in the late 1980s to the early 1990s, you would have had the courts themselves chickening out and not even being willing to entertain any of these applications. Today, you have courts standing steadfast and making even more orders. That is a positive progress institutionally on the part of the court. Number two, in those years we are talking about, you would have counted on the fingers of one hand the number of lawyers who would have turned up in court to associate with the cause of Miguna Miguna. Today, you had many lawyers who turned up in court. In fact, if one were to believe my learned colleague, Mr. Otiende Amolo, the cumulative experience in number of years of lawyers who turned up to court to defend Miguna Miguna was more than 320 years. That's a critical mass of legal minds, of legal experience that turned up. Number three, in years gone by, you would have had the media, you would have had the population asking Miguna Miguna and those lawyers, why are you rubbing the government the wrong way? Today I'm hearing the media and the general public ask the government, why are you unwilling to comply with court orders? I'm pointing out these episodes to let you know that there are positives. But Kenyans must know that the red flag has been raised. The counter wave is on. It is coming strong, and its strength is yet to register fully on the Richter scale. We are yet to know the full gravity of the strength of the counter wave. It calls upon them to stand as human beacons to be able to resist the full impact of this counter wave. Now, let me answer one of the questions you posed to my colleague, Mr. Akusala, about where do we go from here. I want to advise that it is in the government's best interest to comply with court orders. Because, number one, the primary duty of government is to maintain law and order. Government can only maintain law and order in an environment of the rule of law. If the government becomes the leading example in teaching citizens how to disobey law and order, then government is up to a very difficult task, particularly when ordinary citizens take after government in learning on that example. There may be a total breakdown of law and order. There are two losses here. First, government loses legitimacy because it can't deliver on its core mandate of maintaining law and order. Two, the individual government officials are themselves citizens, they are themselves investors, they are themselves owners of life, owners of limbs, owners of property. Where there is a total breakdown of law and order, they themselves may too suffer loss and damage. So it's in the best interest of those who may want to perpetuate this culture of impunity, of those who may want to dishonestly defend this culture of impunity, to understand that in terms of their enlightened self-interest, it is better served by humbling themselves and leading by good example.
Eric, we have our last minute or so. Where do we go from here? Elisha has talked about, he's given his solutions, and so has Akusala. They're talking about what happens within the courts and why that's important. What can ordinary Kenyans do? Where do we go from here?
Well, I guess it is not a problem of ordinary Kenyans. From an ordinary Kenyan perspective, we simply have to remain vigilant. We simply have to keep government to account, and we simply have to call out people like Itumbi who seem not to be interested in observing rule of law and misleading the public. But importantly, I agree with everything else that Mr. Ngoya said, except that as a country that wants to go forward, there must be some critical ingredients that we have to observe. No country, Yvonne, has ever industrialized without a semblance of solid rule of law. No country has ever industrialized without investing in the youth, without investing in subsidizing companies to be more effective in terms of generating income. If you look at what the government has done over the past 3 days, totally unnecessary episode, then they have succeeded in creating an environment where people and potential investors, including you and I, who may be interested in starting companies, begin to think that, you see, this government is not interested in protecting my investments, protecting my intellectual property, protecting rule of law. And if you look at it from that perspective, then I will advise the government that, you know, there are some wars that you better not pick, and a war with Miguna and with the judiciary is one that you are better off avoiding. And there are certain wars that you are better off picking, and a war in terms of trying to bring the country together from a solid rule of law, which they themselves have to obey, is probably a war that they need to pick. civic. So where do we go? I hope that the court will be more robust tomorrow, but it's clear that the government must also try to look inwards and try to ask themselves, look, they will be out of power in about 4 years. What will befall them if they live in an environment where there's no rule of law?
Indeed, thank you very much. That's Eric Komolo, Akusala Boniface, and Elisha Ongoya. I thank you all for your views. I just want to take some of your feedback tonight. Peter Santoni says, regardless of the amount of words Itumbi uses, no one can ever justify illegal detention of a Kenyan citizen in his own country. Daktari Kola says we should hold a referendum to disband the judiciary. We don't need it now that court orders are being disobeyed by the very custodians, the executive. Dennis MW, you say Fred Matiang'i and Joseph Boynet are very busy, too busy to appear before a compromised man. The judiciary in general is compromised. It should be revisited. Mambo himself, you say, what I know is that people in power know no law. Stephen Wambua says the rate at which the rule of law and democracy is sinking in Kenya makes one think we're aiming to discover oil. We need Jehovah God himself to help us out of this horrible pit. Lord Mutai, at It's Mutai, you say the conversation today is one that I want to listen to. We are making progress. Reagan Akil Hassan, as a Kenyan, I am disgusted by my country and president. The government has depicted blatantly the violation of the rule of law. As a common Mwananchi, I'm weakened in spirit and patriotism. Mark Acham says, I want to go to the streets and protest. Who's with me? Enough talk. Okay, I won't go and read the rest of that. Willie So 254. I hope Justice Odunga will find the respondents in the Miguna case unfit to hold public office. Gitao says, watching Sophia Wanuna interview Dennis Itumbi, I still don't know why she has no head of state commendation. Okay. All right. Thanks for watching our show tonight. The conversation continues. The hashtag is the big story. We indeed wait to see what happens in the court of law tomorrow. Will the three present themselves before Justice Odunga? And not just this case, we'll be monitoring all other cases in which government is involved, and indeed all other actors, to speak about this issue of impunity, the rule of law, democracy and development in this country. That's our show for this week. Thanks very much for watching and for your feedback each and every single day. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. Good night. Ben Kitili is up next with KTN Prime.